Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome into rotocurve.com. I'm your host, Michael Rathburn, aka Rath, and we're going to hit you with the Week 12 early slate college fantasy football for DFS on FanDuel and DraftKings. Good to be back. It took last week as a vacation, and I'm back in the saddle, so feels like I've been gone for quite a while, so excited to be back. And a lot of interesting news this week in terms of college fantasy football, the injury impact at the quarterback position and the running back position for this early slate. So definitely something that we want to break down for you. Note on the video is we're going to keep the video to around 6 or 7 picks per quarterback, running back, wide receiver. Give you 3 tight ends, give you a sample DraftKings lineup on how to work these picks into a cash game. And then pretty much what we're going to do on Saturday morning from 10 to 12 is that's where we're going to hit you with any of the late breaking news, any of the sleepers, any of the value plays, any of the tournament plays, guys that I didn't mention in the video because we know the player pool in college football is much deeper than the NFL, but we want to keep the video to, a handful of picks. We don't want to go too crazy and give you too many options. So we'll give you enough picks to make a lineup, give you analysis on all the games, where I'm at with everything. And then again, from Saturday, from around 10 a.m. to 12 noon is really where we make our money with all the late breaking news that comes out. By that time, we typically have some player props that usually can sway me in a certain direction on a couple of guys. And again, like I said, late breaking news, rotocurve.com, forums, and chat room on Saturday morning. So let's go ahead and let's get into week 12, the early slate. As I did with previous posts, is we will have this worksheet posted in the forum so you can download it and you can use it at your leisure. And let's get into it. Now we have a couple of situations here that I want to mention. Arizona State, Arizona. You see I have the line in orange, and then also Houston, UConn. Now, currently, Vegas does not post odds for these two games based on the quarterback situation for Arizona and the quarterback situation for Houston. What I do is I use a few different sources, and I kind of build a consensus as far as what other sites are predicting this matchup could go. These are not fantasy sites, but more predictive model type sites and things like that for handicapping. So that's kind of the direction that I use. I try to get somewhat of a feel for where this game could go because there is no line or total posted. So the first game on the top of the board, Arizona State, Arizona. The consensus that I have that I use has this line at 5 with a total of 75. So they have a projected score of 40 to 35 with Arizona State. So again, this game jumps to the top of the board. It looks like it should be the top total of the slate with opportunities on both sides. Definitely opportunity with Arizona State rushing. Arizona State passing is really where we're going to have an opportunity. Especially with the quarterback. And then also on the run side, Arizona's got a pretty good run offense, but Arizona State's got a good run D. Their pass D is not very good, so that's really where there's a potential to exploit. Oregon, USC. Oregon's been playing better. This game is in Oregon. USC still got something to play for, so this is a big game. Line is 4. That's what we like. We like to see a close game, high scoring. 71.5 total. So around a 38-34 type game. And one of the things that I forgot to mention is, and we have it on, we got the slates, and then also we got to come back over here and get you with the pace as well. All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's get with it. So we got Oregon, USC. Again, pretty good matchup here as far as what Oregon and USC are going to be able to put up on the board points wise. You'll see here we have the FanDuel and the DraftKings where the slates are. Now on FanDuel, you're not going to get Western Kentucky, FIU, Maryland, Indiana, and Georgia Tech, Miami of Florida. Not really worried about the G-Tech Miami game so much, but Maryland, Indiana definitely is going to be a fantasy-friendly game, and Western Kentucky, Florida International, especially on the WK side, you're going to want a piece of that. On the DK side, you're not going to get West Virginia, Kansas, so that's tough because you definitely want to use some guys from West Virginia. You're not going to get Virginia, Duke. Not so much worried about that game. There's a couple guys you might want to use, but more secondary plays for me. That's just a quick rundown of what you're going to have on FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a little bit different this week. They normally don't see that much of a difference between the slates, maybe a game or two, but you do have some variance this week, and it definitely impacts what you're going to do with your lineups. We have the teams in green are the teams that have high projected totals, and those are the teams that we kind of want to focus on. As always, I like to focus where there's an edge, whether it's on rushing or passing. That's really what we want to exploit. So we combine all of those things. Now, the one caveat is if there's a starting running back or a starting quarterback that's out, that opens up a big opportunity from a salary perspective, because now instead of paying $8,000 or $9,000 for a quarterback, can we get somebody in there that's minimum salary of $5,000 or $6,000 that's worthwhile? So we do have that with Houston. If Greg Ward doesn't go, Kyle Postma could be an opportunity where play. And that also impacts the game. What I mean by that is with Greg Ward out and Greg Ward being a heavy rushing quarterback, that's gonna really kind of put the focus on, for me, on Kenneth Farrow, as most of the rushing attempts are now going to be all going to Kenneth Farrow, in my opinion. And this is a type of game against UConn where they have a pretty good defense, and they're going to slow this game down. As you see, this game is actually projected with Houston to win by 14 with a total of 42. You're not going to see Houston with a total of 42 very often. This would be the only case. So there could be more of a grind out, slow down type of game, especially with the quarterback out. This is a very important game for Houston. They've got a lot on the line still. So I would expect Houston to pound Kenneth Farrow and play very conservative in this game and not go crazy and just come out of here with a win. And hopefully Greg Ward can come back and be completely healthy. So that would be my take on that game. That's where, again, we don't have a line posted. And that's kind of the fallout. When you have an injury, you have to assess the situation. Who does this benefit, and how can I benefit from it in daily fantasy? So the other situation that we have a couple of running back situations, and one of them is Utah with Devontae Booker out. So we have Devontae Booker out, and we got Joe Williams in, and he's minimum salary. So that's definitely somebody that we're going to want to look at. The other potential running back situation, and it's looking like this is going to happen as well, is it looks more and more like Wayne Gallman's not going to play. Now, there's not 100% known what's going to happen and where the ball is going to be distributed, but it looks like we have a backup running back for Clemson that could be in a really good spot. Again, Clemson favored by 29. Clemson's not going to let the foot off the gas. They're number one in the country. They have to blow teams out to keep their standing. And Wake Forest is definitely one of those teams that they can blow out. I mean, you got a projected total of around 38.5 to 9.5. So I can expect heavy dosage. You're probably going to see some heavy air early in the game. Clemson could get a big lead and then just sit back and run the ball down Wake Forest's throat, and that's kind of where we can take advantage of, I think. So we'll jump back at the top. Western Kentucky, Maryland, Indiana, North Carolina, West Virginia, Iowa. These are all teams that we absolutely want to be playing on this week. You have Clemson down here as well. Not too heavy on Clemson, but again, quarterback, running back situation I think is absolutely in play. And then the injury situation opens it up for some other teams. We look for games with low, we got a lot of pretty good spreads this week as far as no crazy spreads. You have West Virginia at minus 28, but West Virginia's definitely got something to play for. The coach's job is definitely in play. And then also you definitely got to like Skylar Howard, quarterback for West Virginia. He's got a good price. And also Wendell Smallwood out of West Virginia as well, and the running back in the backfield. So even though they did go with a lot of shell, and that could still happen in this game, I still feel like Smallwood's the main guy and should get a lot of the run. On the North Carolina Virginia Tech side, I'm not in love with this game. I have a funny feeling that Virginia Tech could potentially pull the upset here and really slow the pace of this game down, which makes me really want to lean more towards fading this game. And no, I'm not really on North Carolina this week. That's just my opinion. Maryland, Indiana is absolutely a game that you're going to want a piece of on both sides. Both teams' defenses are two of the worst in the country overall, especially in the air. So you've got two quarterbacks, Maryland and Indiana. Now, Maryland's quarterback runs a lot, and Indiana's quarterback's going to throw a lot. I feel a lot more comfortable taking Sudfeld from Indiana than I do Hills, mainly because of the air attack is a little bit more consistent than the run game. Although Maryland's Hills is going to get 10 rushes, just a matter of how many yards he's going to actually get, and if he can get touchdowns on the ground. So from that perspective, I like both those quarterbacks more as a second quarterback in a tournament. As obviously at DraftKings you have two quarterbacks, so those quarterbacks in the Maryland Indiana game for me are absolutely in play as a second QB with a guy like maybe a guy like Dowdy or maybe a guy like Watson. You want to offset those. West Virginia, Kansas is FanDuel only. Again, we talked about that. Memphis, Temple is a game. Game could be slowed down a little bit here. I do like Memphis's quarterback. However, more of a tournament play for me. Again, I think the game could get slowed down a little bit due to Temple on that side. I'll go over here to show you some of the matchups, but that's kind of where I'm playing that. I like Lynch. I don't have a problem with Lynch in cash on a two-quarterback site, but I think I'm mostly leaning more towards tournaments because, again, this game could get slowed down. I don't want to overpay for a guy in a game that's not really optimal. But, again, we got a pretty good total. And we got a pretty good line as far as closeness of a game. It's a big game for both teams. Memphis and Temple are now relevant this year, so definitely a big game for both sides. Iowa, Purdue, you got to love the Iowa run game. The problem that we have with the Iowa run game is this situation typically has kind of worked itself out from week to week based on injuries, whether it's Canzeri, whether it's Wadley, whether it's Daniels. So now all three guys look to be back. What does that mean? We really don't know. Daniels had a monster game last week, so Daniels would be the guy that I would lean on. You still can get him at a pretty good price. But I don't necessarily trust him in cash games. He's more of a tournament play for me. So that's where I would lean with Daniels. Again, he could blow up and go off, but we don't know if they're going to split this 3 ways or 2 ways. So we want to be careful. We want running backs we feel are going to get immense touches in the backfield. Utah, UCLA, definitely a couple spots in this game that I like. The running back situation for Utah with Booker out and Williams stepping in, and Williams is extremely cheap across the industry, so you got to use him. On the UCLA side, Utah's got a pretty good defense, but I like Jordan Payton in this spot at wide receiver because he's so consistent and he's pretty cheap, and it's a good opportunity for him. Double-digit targets last 4 games, and you get him at a really good price, so he'd be an absolute guy I would recommend in cash and tournaments. No problem there. Georgia Tech, Miami, got to like somewhat of the Georgia Tech run game in this spot. We see here the matchups. We know G-Tech's got an elite run offense. Miami is pretty much packed it in. They fired their coach. Everything's in chaos. The problem is G-Tech splits the ball up in several different ways. You don't know which way they're going to go. So, again, I can't use any of those guys in cash. But tournaments, I'm probably looking at getting a piece of the G-Tech running attack. We'll talk about that Saturday morning. Miss LSU. This is a very interesting situation. You're going to see the salary on Ole Miss quarterback Chad Kelly on DraftKings is significantly cheaper, about $2,500 cheaper. And that, to me, makes him in play. It's not a great matchup, but it is at home. And LSU right now is in a very tough spot. LSU, are they going to pack it in? And is this going to be the game like we saw happen last week where they got the doors blown off them? Does LSU have anything to play for at this point? Is their coach going to go? Leonard Fournette is probably more concerned about the NFL. He's got 1 more year, but he's got to also make sure that he doesn't get injured in the situation. So I think this is a spot where Ole Miss could really beat up on LSU. And I think the Ole Miss passing game is in play in tournaments because it could be probably more lower owned because people are going to be scared of that LSU defense. Virginia and Duke, not a lot here. I don't mind taking a wide receiver from Virginia, Severin, who had a big game. But, close game, more of a grind-out type game. Both these teams are going to play at a pretty slow pace, so not a lot of fantasy goodness in that game. Ohio State, Michigan State's interesting. It's a game, definitely the game of the slate as far as, the importance. However, we know these teams do like to grind it out and got pretty good defenses. I think there's opportunity in this game to play some of these players in tournaments because, again, I'm not going to play these guys in cash because if this ends up being a 17-13 game, you're going to get screwed. But if this game happens to go back and forth like it potentially could, because we do have two pretty good offenses, that's kind of where you're going to come into play. I know a lot of people on Barrett. I'm not really on Barrett so much this week. I think he definitely isn't playing a tournament. I can't use him in cash because of the potential of a low-scoring game. But guys like Barrett and Elliott, I think, are potential tournament plays because their ownership could be lower. And then on the Michigan State side, I think a guy like Burbridge is a guy that you could look at. But again, not cash game plays for me because of the potential of a very low-scoring game. But again, you've got two pretty good offenses, two pretty good defenses. So you definitely want to, definitely don't be afraid to take a couple of those guys in a tournament, especially when you're playing multiple entry. Clemson, Wake Forest, we talked about on the Clemson side, the value is all going to be on the running back. And hopefully we get some more clarity on that as far as the running back situation goes. On Deshaun Watson, Watson is the offense. Watson is the guy that makes this team go. And with Fournette kind of falling out of the Heisman situation a little bit, Watson's kind of moved into the driver's seat along with Derrick Henry. So Watson's got big motivation for this game. As far as, putting up big numbers. Michigan, Penn State, 3.5 is the line, 41.5 is the total. Not a lot here that I'm definitely not going to take anybody from Penn State. And I don't love a lot of guys from Michigan, although Chesson's a guy I think you can look at as far as like a number 3 wide receiver in cash because he is going to get targets, he is going to get volume, but there's maybe not a lot of upside there. And similar situation with Wisconsin, Northwestern, you get that low total of 40 with a line of 10. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere near Northwestern. I know Justin Jackson, but still, I'm off him. I've been off him. Wisconsin, I'm pretty much looking at two guys every week. I'm looking at Alex Erickson, wide receiver, and I'm looking at Troy Fumagalli at tight end. So we know that's only in play on FanDuel. Though I pretty much been playing Erickson and Fumagalli for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it's paid off. They're pretty consistent players. They're not heavily priced, and you get good value for your play. Let's jump on over to the picks. We'll see here we got salaries for DraftKings and FanDuel. Some of these guys are in play on both. Some of them are in play only on one, and some are recommended on one, not on the other, or only in play on one. So Deshaun, absolutely in play. Now you don't see, he's at 10-1 on FanDuel. Quarterback, because you're only playing one guy, is much more important. So you don't, it's okay to pay up, but at 10-1, it makes roster construction a little bit tough. But again, I don't have a problem doing it. I think there's enough value, especially at the running back position, where you can definitely do it this week. But you see here, he's got more value on DraftKings at 8,700. Chad Kelly is a very interesting option here. 9,100 on FanDuel, so I'm not playing him there. But he's only 6,600 on DraftKings, and it looks like their algorithm has probably adjusted quite heavily to that LSU matchup. So I think that, at 6,600, that's so cheap that you have to consider it as a second quarterback. Now, there is a potential that he lays a dud because the defense for LSU just limits his potential. But I think the floor at 6,600, again, if I'm going 2 quarterbacks cash, I'm looking at a floor. Kelly's a guy that can give you a floor. Am I going to look at a guy like Postma? Am I going to look at a guy like Sudfeld or Hills? I think, to me, those are more tournament plays because of the fear of the unknown. But I feel a lot more comfortable with Kelly at that price point, especially on DraftKings. Doughty is DraftKings only at 8,800. So you're looking at Watson, Doughty, and then mixing in Kelly, Howard, Postma. And Lynch is a guy that I think kind of sticks out as far as if you want to load up at the quarterback position and go Doughty, Lynch, Watson, Lynch. I think there's opportunities for you to do that this week because you got so much value at the running back position. But again, we know it's dangerous when you load up at quarterback because it doesn't leave the rest of your roster pretty wide open. But the way that the schedule works out on DraftKings, I think you can do it. I think you can pay up at quarterback. And I still think you can pay up with a guy like Jordan Howard and find a way to get some savings and get some of these other guys in there. So the 3 other quarterbacks that I like, Skylar Howard, West Virginia at 6,900 only on FanDuel against Kansas. A lot of upside at that sub-7, and Kyle Postma, Houston. If Greg Ward doesn't go, he becomes an automatic play for me. UConn's defense is tough, but again, I'm getting a starting quarterback at a pretty good price. And, I feel good about him in that offense. And then Paxton Lynch, 8,600 on FanDuel, 8,100 on DraftKings. Close matchup, good total. He's been one of the best quarterbacks all year, and I still think you're getting him at a pretty good price. Running back situation, Wendell Smallwood, West Virginia, 7,600 only on FanDuel. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups. Really stinks that you can't get Jordan Howard on FanDuel, but I love him on DraftKings. He's my number one running back there. He's going to be in every single one of my lineups. Jared Baker, unless I go heavy at the quarterback and I can't fit him in. Jared Baker, Joe Williams, Zach Brooks, all potential of starting this week due to injury. So let's keep an eye on those injury situations late tonight, early tomorrow morning, because that's really going to make or break where these rosters go. I've got heavy shares of Baker, Williams, and Brooks because you've got to find value in college football. It's hard to find value at the wide receiver position because so many guys are used and the variance is high. When you find situations where you know this running back is going to get the bulk of the carries or the bulk of the touches, guys like Baker, Williams, and Brooks become automatic plays because the upside is so huge and the floor is already locked in because you know they're going to get the ball. So Baker, he's on FanDuel and DraftKings. Williams is on DraftKings, and then Brooks we have on FanDuel and DraftKings as well. Farrow's another guy that I talked about as far as, if Greg Ward is out, I think Farrow definitely gets bumped up as a top elite running back because then they're going to feed him the ball more. He's 7,400 on FanDuel, 6,400 on DraftKings. Wide receiver, Tywon Taylor, number one wide receiver for Western Kentucky. He's only 6,200. Got to think they go back to the well here with him, especially against a team like FIU. So Western Kentucky should get back to putting up some serious monster points, and I think Taylor could be the guy that's a recipient there. Juju Smith-Schuster, USC, was banged up. Looks like he's healthy. You're getting him at 7, which isn't bad on DraftKings. Laquan Treadwell, out of play for me on FanDuel, but absolutely in play for me on DraftKings at 7,100. He's Chad Kelly's go-to guy, and he's got a lot to play for right now as far as the NFL goes. We talked about Erickson, love him every week. Jordan Payton, and then also Braylon Addison. I think these are kind of like the wide receiver trio that I'm probably going to roll out in cash. It's going to be Erickson, Payton, and Addison because of the price points. It allows me to pay up at running back and quarterback position. And Addison's in a pretty good spot. He is arguably their number one wide receiver, and they're starting to play better. The other guy is Chason from Michigan because you're getting him so cheap on DraftKings at 4,300, and he had a monster game last week. Again, more of a flex or a tournament play for me. But at 4,300, if you need salary relief, and if you take out a guy like if you need $800 savings or $700 savings, you can take out Erickson or Addison, put in Chason. Tight end, FanDuel only. We got Leggett, we got Fumagalli and Sarine. I'm probably going to roll with Fumagalli and Sarine to get some savings. But Leggett's more of a tournament play for me, as you do have that touchdown upside. What I got over here, I'm not a huge fan of posting lineups. But because we're restricting on the picks for the video, I felt like there was I wanted to show you guys a way to build a lineup using these plays. And this is a DraftKings cash game play for me, and I'm going to explain why. So we go with the number one quarterback for me. I think you can flip-flop between Watson and Doty and still squeeze this in because this salary team is at 49.9. So Watson or Doty, I think you can put in play here. I put Kelly in because I feel safe with him. I know that you got Hills, and I know you got Sudfeld, and I don't have a problem necessarily putting either one of those guys in, but I'm going to lean more towards Kelly as far as my top play at that mid-6 position. Jordan Howard is absolutely the number one running back for me on DraftKings at 8K. This guy could get 25, 30 carries in a pretty high-scoring game. Talked about the 3 value running backs, and I'm going to go running back heavy in cash games on DraftKings because they have the double flex. And I want safety. I want touches. I want guaranteed floors. Wide receiver is so variant in college football, even more than the NFL, that you don't want to run a lineup out there of 5 wide receivers because the odds are you could have a couple of duds that could sink your team. So in cash games, I want running backs that are going to give me touches that have clear path or extreme value. Baker's a guy at 4,800. If we see Nick Wilson's out for sure, Baker becomes an elite option at 4,800 in a high total game where they're going to have to rely on him quite heavily, especially if the quarterback situation is not resolved. We talked about Peyton, Erickson, and Addison. Again, I'm looking at wide receivers in that 5 to 6K range that are usually number one wide receivers on their team that get heavy targets. Peyton, Erickson, and Addison do that. So those are all guys that I feel very confident with their floors in the cash game. And then Williams and Brooks at 3,000 on FanDuel, starting running backs in pretty good games. You got to like the situation. You notice here, I try to mix up. I've got 2 guys on Clemson. Now, in cash on college football, it's okay if you run 2 guys from the same team. Typically, I don't like doing running back and wide receiver, but I'm okay doing quarterback and running back, especially in this situation where we have a heavy favorite and Watson is such an elite talent and Brooks is priced so cheap. And I got a player from Miss. I got IU. You see here, I really try to spread around the games that I'm in. UCLA, Utah, I have 2 shares, but I got one side UCLA, I got one side Utah. So again, I'm trying to spread the risk around and get as much exposure to as many games as possible. You don't want to be heavily exposed to any one particular game. Again, if it doesn't go your way in a cash game, that you get 80%, 90% of your rosters in cash games. So you want to absolutely make sure you diversify, heavy on the running back, heavy on at least one quarterback, and go for those consistent, cheap wide receivers on a week in and week out basis. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed the video this week. Again, we're going to post this in the forum. We're going to post the Excel spreadsheet, and hope you enjoyed the video. And again, Saturday morning, 10 to 12, that's where we're going to dig deeper to a lot of the plays I didn't talk about in the video this week. We're going to try to keep it to 6 to 8 plays per position in the video. And any late breaking news that impacts the way that we're going to build lineups is absolutely going to be something we're going to hit Saturday morning in the forums and in the chat room. Follow us on rotocurve.com. Thanks again, guys.